With Ant-Man and the Wasp now out in theaters, it's hard not to see Scott Lang, Hank Pym, and Hope and Janet Van Dyne as the heroic characters they're portrayed as in the MCU. While the Ant-Man and Wasp characters have typically always been on the side of good, in the comics they've got a complicated and sometimes dark past that didn't make it onto the big screen, and probably never will. There's many good reason why the Ant-Man that we're watching in movie theaters is Scott Lang rather than Hank Pym. So today we're diving into those details and taking a look at the skeletons in their closets, with our list of the top 10 things Marvel doesn't want you to know about Ant-Man and the Wasp. Starting us off in at number 10, Yellowjacket. In the first Ant-Man movie, the villain was Yellowjacket, aka Darren Cross, who worked for Pym Technologies and was obsessed with proving himself to be better than Hank. But in the comics, the first Yellowjacket was actually Hank Pym himself. While he's had many an alias in the past, Pym became Yellowjacket as a result of his declining mental health. He had a mental breakdown that was attributed to schizophrenia, a condition he apparently gained when he accidentally inhaled some mind-altering chemicals, which led him to creating this more bold, cocky, and confident hero. When he first hit the scene after stopping a robbery and advising the press on how to spell his name right, he went to the Avengers mansion, demanded membership, claiming to have killed Hank Pym. He then fought the Avengers, kidnapped Janet, and then brought her back to his secret lair, where they made out and she figured out he was Hank because of it. Next up at number 9, Ultron. The reason why Hank had a mental breakdown and eventually turned into Yellowjacket is because of Ultron. Now in the comics, Hank Pym is the one who creates Ultron rather than Tony Stark as depicted in the MCU. There was a point when Hank began working more in the field of robotics and decided to create a living robot. That robot was Ultron, who soon intellectually surpassed Hank, rebelled against him, and then fought the Avengers. As you can imagine, it caused Hank a lot of grief and stress. But at that point, the Avengers didn't know that he was the one responsible for the robot's creation, and Hank had blocked it out of his memory. Ultron would then surface again, part of a supervillain team he brought together known as the Crimson Cowl. This is when the Vision showed up, created by Ultron, who would then help them defeat Ultron, all while unraveling the truth that Hank had been the one behind this homicidal robot's creation. This truth forced Hank into a nervous breakdown, the second in his history of appearances in the comics. Up next, number 8, Pymtron. In Uncanny Avengers issue 4, volume 3, we see the return of Hank Pym, who, during the Avengers Rage of Ultron story arc, had been merged with Ultron, creating Pymtron. At the time, it was ahead of Secret Wars, and the all-new, all-different reboot that Marvel did, so many were unsure as to whether or not Pymtron would actually exist moving onwards. But turns out, he did, and he returned as one of the good guys. And it was weird as f***. Ultron was basically using Pym's body as a vessel, essentially wearing his father's skin over his body and pretending to be him. So yeah, probably best that they went with Tony Stark creating Ultron in the MCU. Up next, number 7, Hope's origins. In the main Marvel continuity, Hank and Janet never have kids. Their marriage is turbulent at best, and it never actually results in them having any children. So where does the name Hope come from? Well, Hope actually does exist, but in a different line of continuity, the MC2 universe, where she's initially a supervillain known as the Red Queen. She's also the daughter of Hank and Janet, and has a twin brother named Henry Pym Jr., who operates under the alias Big Man. These two have beef with a team called A-Next, who the public refer to as the next generation of Avengers. After Hank and Janet have died, the twins go after A-Next. They use their parents' fortune to put together a supervillain team known as the Revengers, which did not include Thor, and they ambush them. Hope in particular doesn't like Cassie Lang, Scott Lang's daughter, feeling that she deserves to be the rightful heir to Ant-Man's legacy instead, so she tries to torture her. Up next at 6, their marriage. Speaking of Hank and Janet's marriage, the two tied the knot again when he returned as Yellowjacket, but like all things Yellowjacket, it was under weird circumstances. So remember how Hank as Yellowjacket kidnapped Janet? Well, when the Avengers finally caught up to them to rescue her, she announced that she was going to marry him. When the wedding took place, Hank was still in a very unstable condition, not even really certain of his identity as Hank, which would later lead Janet to feel quite a lot of guilt towards having him marry her, despite constantly reminding him that their marriage was in fact legal. There's even some great panels of Janet and Hank at different sizes making out, explaining to a reluctant Hawkeye that everything was totally fine and okay, and he should just really chill out some more. I mean, Hawkeye's not wrong. And at number 5, Hank's origin. Hank Pym's origin story could explain why he's had such a rough time in terms of his mental health. His father was pretty cruel to him. His grandmother was the only family member who ever believed in him, and he fell in love for the first time with a biochemist, who ends up getting murdered on a trip to Hungary. This is when his first nervous breakdown happened, but it's actually what gave him the drive to create the Pym particles. And at number 4, he's suicidal. While Hank in the MCU was going through a tough time during the years that Janet was lost in the quantum realm, his struggle has arguably not been as messy or complicated as his comic counterparts. It even got to the point where Hank became suicidal in the comics. Back in West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 17, after all that craziness craziness occurred when Hank was Yellowjacket, Hank moved on to the West Coast Avengers to act as an advisor. Seems fairly restrained, right? Compared to fighting crime. But turns out it still had its fair share of turmoil. Hank ended up being taunted by an old adversary, Whirlwind, who got under his skin by calling him a failure. This prompted Hank to want to commit suicide, and he even wrote goodbye letters. But he's prevented from carrying through with it when Firebird sends him on a mission. Up next in our number 3 spot, Erik O'Grady. While Hank Pym and Scott Lang are the most well-known individuals to take up the Ant-Man mantle, there's actually been a third character in the comics to shrink down to the size of an insect. That individual is Erik O'Grady, and he's a complete piece of shit. O'Grady has a pretty awful track record when it comes to being a superhero. He also became Ant-Man by stealing the suit, except the circumstances he did it under were significantly worse. He was a subpar agent who worked at S.H.I.E.L.D., whose best friend and roommate, Chris, another agent, was tasked to guard the suit by wearing it. When Chris died, he stole it off his corpse. He would later go on to sleep with Chris's girlfriend, get her pregnant, then ditch her entirely, not wanting the responsibility, mutilate another agent's face with his jetpack, and then use his powers to get laid. If he couldn't get a girl to sleep with him after their date, he would shrink down, follow them home, and watch them undress there. At one point, he even snuck into Carol Danvers' shower when she was Miss Marvel. So, yeah, he was a mega perv. But he also got killed in battle, so no big loss there. Up next, number 2, killing the Avengers. But not quite. So Hank's history of poor mental health should be pretty obvious by now. In issue 212 of Avengers back in 1981, the superhero team went up against a villain known as Elf Queen. She had stopped attacking the group and was speaking to Captain America when Yellowjacket attacked her. This led to the team court-martialing him. And fearing that he would be kicked off the team for good, a team that in the comics he helped found, he concocted a crazy scheme to make sure that he would still remain as one of the members. This involved creating a robot to attack the Avengers, with the intention of swooping in and saving them, therefore showing them that they really needed him, redeeming himself. Because, putting their lives at risk just for your own ego is totally cool and heroic. When the robot did attack them, it also turns on Hank as well, and the Wasp ended up being the one who disables it. So plan didn't work out there, Hank did it. Finally, in at number 1, wife beating. That's definitely something we'll never see in a Marvel movie, but it's something that happened in the comics, and it's a pretty famous panel. In that same Avengers issue, 213, Hank Pym struck his wife Janet. This was because of our last point. When Janet found out about Hank's plan in retaliation, he hit her. She had been begging him not to go through with it, and his response was to backhand her, telling her to shut up, and that he had to do it and save the Avengers right before their eyes. After his plan fails, he ends up leaving on his own, disgraced by his actions. Years later, Jim Shooter, who was the editor-in-chief at Marvel at the time, would write an article for his blog titled "Hank Pym Was Not a Wife Beater," claiming that the initial plan for the comic was that him hitting Janet was meant to be an accident, but the artwork came out much stronger than he wanted, and it was too late to change it. But considering that Hank literally says, I quote, "All you've got to do is play along and keep your mouth shut," got that? After he beats Janet, and then shows zero remorse for it, I mean, the panels beg to differ. Kinda seemed like he was abusing his wife right from the get-go there. There we have it, friends. How many of these facts about Ant-Man and the Wasp did you already know? And how many of them surprised you? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know all of your feels. If you dug this video, please spread the love and hit that like button. But also don't forget to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for all things comic books, from lists to news to theories and more. We've also got a fancy little playlist up on your screen right now with more MCU videos for your peepers to check out. And lots on Ant-Man in the comics too. In the meantime though, thanks for watching everybody. I'll catch you all in the next video.